Picture a Tuesday morning in October. Cold air. Gray sky. A train station moving the way train stations always move, thousands of people, thousands of directions, nobody looking at anybody. Coffee cups. Rolling luggage. A child asking her mother something that gets swallowed by the noise. Departure boards flickering. The ordinary machinery of a world that has completely forgotten someone's name. Then one camera catches something. Platform 7. 8:42 a.m. A woman walks into frame. Medium height. Dark coat. Hair pulled back. She isn't rushing. She isn't scanning the exits. She isn't doing any of the things a person does when they're afraid of being found. She's carrying a briefcase, weathered brown leather, the kind that looks like it's been somewhere. The kind that looks like it's full of something. She stops. She looks directly into the security camera. Not accidentally. Not as a reflex. She finds the lens, the way you find someone's eyes across a room when you have something to say to them. She holds that look for 4 seconds. Then she walks on. It would be unremarkable footage, except for one thing. That woman had been dead for 7 years. Her name is Amelia Hart. And the last time the world saw her face, a sitting federal investigation had just gone cold, a casket was being lowered into the ground without a body inside it, and the men she had been closing in on were already celebrating. Look at the briefcase again. Look at how she's holding it, not with the carelessness of someone transporting files, but with the deliberate, quiet grip of someone who knows exactly what they're carrying and exactly what it's worth. That briefcase isn't luggage. That briefcase is a detonator. Within 6 hours of this footage surfacing online, 3 government servers went offline. 2 journalists who shared the clip received unannounced visits from federal agents, not phone calls, not emails. Visits. And a retired schoolteacher who had spoken briefly to Amelia on that platform, who gave a single 3-minute statement to an independent reporter, stopped answering her phone that same night. Her family says she's traveling. Nobody has confirmed where. Ask yourself what that reaction tells you. Because here's the question this entire story comes down to, and I need you to hold it in your mind for everything that follows. What did Amelia Hart find in 7 years of silence, and who exactly was willing to bury her alive to make sure you never found out? Before we talk about where she went, you need to understand what she was. Because the way this story gets told in certain circles, when it gets told at all, is that Amelia Hart was a troubled woman. Obsessive. Erratic. Someone who got too deep into something she didn't understand and eventually broke under the weight of it. That's the version powerful people need you to believe. Here's what the record actually shows. Amelia Hart graduated top of her class with a dual degree in environmental law and investigative journalism. She didn't stumble into this work. She built a career specifically designed to follow money through systems that were constructed to hide it. By the time she was 31, she had published 3 major exposés on corporate lobbying that directly resulted in 2 Senate hearings and 1 federal penalty exceeding $40 million. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't speculating. She was documenting, with sources, with paper trails, with the kind of meticulous evidence that survives legal challenge. She was not a conspiracy theorist. She was the thing conspiracy theorists wish they were, a credentialed, sourced, unimpeachable insider who knew exactly where to look. In the final 8 months before she disappeared, Amelia was working on something she refused to name to anyone, even her closest colleagues. She turned down a staff meeting briefing that was standard procedure at her outlet. She stopped using her office computer for anything substantive. And she told exactly one person, her editor of 6 years, in a conversation he has since described in a sworn affidavit, just this. If this comes out, people at the top go to prison. Not lose their jobs. Not resign. Prison. He asked her who. She told him she'd explain when it was finished. She never got the chance. The men orbiting her investigation, never formally named, never charged, never so much as publicly questioned, sketched themselves clearly enough through what we know. A senior executive at a private intelligence contracting firm with active federal agreements. A sitting U.S. senator on the oversight committee responsible for regulating that exact firm. And a private equity billionaire whose portfolio was so deeply embedded in government infrastructure contracts that the line between his wealth and public funds had become, by any honest assessment, fictional. 3 weeks before she vanished, Amelia received a voicemail. She saved it. Her sister later confirmed its existence to investigators. The message contained exactly 2 words. Stop now. No name. No number that traced anywhere real. She didn't stop. 10 days before she disappeared, her apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken. Not her laptop. Not her files. Not cash she kept in a desk drawer. Whoever entered her home wasn't there to steal anything. They were there to search, and possibly to send a message about how easily they could enter. She filed a police report. It was processed and shelved. On a Thursday afternoon in March, 7 years ago, Amelia Hart walked out of her office building at 5:17 p.m. Colleagues saw her leave. She said goodnight to the security guard in the lobby. He remembered it specifically because she'd seemed calm, almost focused, like someone who had just made a decision. The world didn't see her again for 7 years. Until a cold October morning. Platform 7. A weathered briefcase. 4 seconds of eye contact with a security camera. Amelia Hart didn't disappear because she broke. She disappeared because she was too close, and someone with the reach to make people vanish decided that was the faster solution. They tried to disarm the weapon. What they didn't count on was that she spent 7 years sharpening it. Here's what a real investigation into a missing journalist looks like. Witnesses interviewed within 48 hours. Digital forensics on every device she touched. Financial records subpoenaed. Her last known contacts brought in. The people she was investigating, scrutinized. Hard. Publicly. With the kind of institutional pressure that makes powerful men sweat through expensive suits. Here's what actually happened. The case was opened on a Friday. 3 days after Amelia was last seen, which was already slow. It was assigned to a single detective in a mid-sized field office, given a case number, and entered into the system. For the first 4 months, it moved. Slowly, but it moved. Then it stalled. Then it stalled harder. And at the 14-month mark, with no body, no suspect, no declared lead, and no public explanation, the case was quietly closed. Not suspended. Not transferred. Closed. Now let's talk about what disappeared along with it. Amelia's work laptop, the one she used daily, the one her IT department confirmed she had checked out and never returned, was logged as evidence in the initial case inventory. By month 3, it was no longer listed. No transfer record. No destruction log. No chain of custody notation explaining its absence. It simply ceased to exist in the file. A second phone. A prepaid device her editor confirmed she had been using exclusively for source communications in the final weeks before she vanished, was never recovered. Never seriously pursued. The carrier records were requested once and the request was not followed up on. And a physical folder. Dark green. Her editor described it in specific terms in a statement he gave independently. She carried it every day in her final 2 months. It contained printed materials she refused to leave at the office. That folder appears nowhere in the official case record. Not as evidence. Not as missing. Not at all. The detective who opened the investigation was transferred to a field office in another state 6 weeks into the case. He gave no public comment at the time. He has refused every interview request since, not deflecting, not saying, no comment. Refusing. The kind of refusal that comes with visible discomfort. In year 3, Amelia's sister filed a Freedom of Information request. Standard procedure. A citizen asking her government what it knows about her missing family member. It was blocked. Under a national security exemption. Sit with that for a moment. A missing journalist. A cold missing persons case. Blocked from her own family under the same legal framework used to protect state secrets and classified intelligence operations. The government looked at a grieving sister asking where her sibling went, and said, national security. An FBI field office independently opened a parallel investigation in year 2. It was shut down before it hit 90 days. The closure was authorized from above the field level. The agents who worked it have never spoken publicly. And then came the funeral. No body was ever recovered. No forensic evidence of death was ever produced. But 18 months after her disappearance, a death certificate was issued for Amelia Hart. Processed with a speed that multiple legal experts later described as procedurally unusual for a case with zero physical evidence. Her family, exhausted and grieving and told by everyone official that hope was gone, held a service. Empty casket. Full church. The men she had been investigating sent flowers. Every single failure in this investigation points the same direction. That's not incompetence. Incompetence scatters. It sends you left when you should go right, wastes time on wrong leads, loses things randomly. What happened to this investigation didn't scatter. It converged, every gap, every missing piece, every door quietly closed, all of it landing in the same place. Silence. On behalf of the same people. Now I'm going to tell you where Amelia Hart actually was. And I need you to understand, this isn't speculation. This is reconstructed from what Amelia herself has disclosed through legal channels, corroborated by 2 independent sources with direct knowledge, and consistent with documented evidence now in the possession of her legal team. She didn't run. She was taken. The disappearance that looked like a woman walking out of her life was, in fact, a coordinated extraction. Planned, resourced, and executed with the kind of operational precision that doesn't come from local law enforcement or a panicked billionaire. This had the fingerprints of people who had done this before. People for whom making someone vanish without a body, without a scene, without a single credible witness, was not an improvisation. It was a procedure. For the first 18 months, Amelia was held in a facility she has since described as off-grid. Not a prison, not a black site in any cinematic sense, but a property that existed nowhere on any official record she was ever able to locate. Comfortable, she said. Climate-controlled. Books. Adequate food. Staff who were professional and almost entirely silent. And completely, suffocatingly surveilled. No charges were filed. No lawyer was provided or permitted. No court date was set. She was simply held. In a legal void, in a building that didn't exist, by people who never identified themselves by name. Then came the offer. A man she knew only by a first name, she believes it was false, sat across from her with a single document and a pen and explained her options with the calm of someone describing a weather forecast. Sign the document. Accept a new identity. Relocate permanently outside the country. Live comfortably. Never speak of any of it. In exchange, the investigation she had built would be buried with her old name. The people she had been closing in on would continue their work undisturbed. And Amelia Hart, the journalist, the record, the threat, would cease to exist. She asked for time to consider. They gave her a week. What they didn't know is that she had already decided. And the answer was no. What they also didn't know, what they couldn't have anticipated, was that 3 days into that week, a handler who had grown comfortable in the routine of her apparent cooperation left a document on a table when he stepped out of the room. He was gone for less than 4 minutes. Amelia read every word. She has never disclosed the full contents of what she saw in those 4 minutes. But she has said this: it was the first fragment of something much larger than even she had suspected. A name she recognized. A budget line that shouldn't have existed. A reference to a program designation she had never encountered, but would spend the next 5 years hunting from the inside. Because that's what the next 5 years were. She signed nothing. She told them she needed more time. She made herself quiet and agreeable and faintly broken in the way they needed her to be, cooperative enough that the surveillance relaxed by degrees, that the staff stopped watching her the way you watch a threat and started watching her the way you watch furniture. She played the long game with the patience of someone who had nothing left to lose and one very specific thing left to do. She built a map. From fragments. From overheard conversations she was never supposed to understand. From documents left carelessly in her presence by people who had decided she was defeated. From a camera so small it shouldn't have existed in that facility and yet somehow did, she has never explained how she obtained it. She built a network of 3 people. She will not name them. One was inside, a low-level staff member whose conscience proved more durable than their paycheck. One was outside, maintaining a dead drop she communicated through in a method she has not disclosed. One was a lawyer operating under a false brief, building a legal container for what she was collecting. That lawyer died 14 months before Amelia walked out. Ruled a cardiac event. He was 44 years old and had no documented heart condition. The remaining 2 held. And when Amelia finally determined she had enough, not everything, but enough, she made a decision that was either the bravest or the most calculated thing a human being can do, and perhaps both at once. She would not escape quietly. She would not slip away in the dark and surface in a safe house and funnel documents through intermediaries while staying invisible. She would walk into the most public space she could find. She would look directly into a camera. She would carry everything in her hands where the world could see it. Because they had already proven they could make her disappear once. The only way to make that impossible the second time was to make sure that the entire world was watching when she came back. Platform 7. 8:42 a.m. 4 seconds of eye contact. Not a victim emerging from 7 years of captivity. An operative completing a mission she had been running since the moment they underestimated her. Let's open it. Not all at once. Because the way this evidence lands matters, and if you understand what each layer represents, you'll understand why the people whose names live inside that briefcase haven't slept properly since October. The first layer is the foundation. Classified internal communications between a private intelligence contracting firm and contacts across 3 branches of the federal government. Not leaked memos. Not second-hand summaries. Direct correspondence. Time-stamped, threaded, specific, spanning 11 years of operational coordination between private money and public power. 11 years of a relationship that was never disclosed, never reported to the oversight bodies legally required to know about it, and never, not once, subjected to the scrutiny that any honest reading of the law would demand. 11 years. 3 administrations. Both parties represented somewhere in that chain. The second layer has a name. Operation Lodestar. This is the program at the center of everything. And I want you to hear what it actually was, not what the people scrambling to contain it will eventually claim it was. Lodestar was a systematic, funded, operationally structured program designed to do 3 things to specific categories of people: monitor them, discredit them, and when monitoring and discrediting proved insufficient, neutralize them. That word appears in the internal documentation. Neutralize. Applied to journalists. To whistleblowers. To public interest lawyers working in sectors where the contracting firm and its government partners had financial exposure. This was not counterterrorism. These were not foreign threats. These were Americans doing the job that a functioning democracy requires someone to do, and they were being hunted for it with federal adjacent resources and private funding that left almost no fingerprints. The third layer is the money. Financial records tracing a labyrinth of shell companies, incorporated across 4 countries, structured specifically to resist forensic accounting, back to a sovereign wealth fund operated by parties whose interests are, to use the most restrained possible language, not aligned with American democratic oversight. And those same financial records connect that fund, through 3 intermediate layers, to American officials. Officials who were simultaneously serving on the regulatory and oversight bodies responsible for monitoring the exact sectors this money was moving through. They were supposed to be the watchdogs. They were on the payroll. The 4th layer is audio. 2 recorded conversations. The recordings themselves have been reviewed by independent audio forensic analysts, not partisan commentators, not anonymous sources, credentialed professionals who have provided sworn assessments of their authenticity. One of those recordings features a voice that analysts matched, with a stated confidence level that leaves almost no professional room for doubt, to a sitting senior official currently holding federal office. The content of that conversation is not ambiguous. Amelia Hart is discussed by name. Her investigation is referenced directly. And the language used, calm, administrative, procedural, is the language of people deciding what to do about a problem. This recording predates her disappearance by roughly 11 weeks. They knew. They planned. They acted. And the 5th layer is the one that should make every person watching this feel something cold move through them. A list. 43 names. 43 individuals who had been formally entered into Lodestar's targeting system, assessed, categorized, and assigned an operational designation based on the threat level the program's architects believed they represented to the interests being protected. Of those 43 people, 9 are dead. Every single death was ruled accidental or suicide. Ages ranging from 31 to 58. No pattern that any single medical examiner would have been positioned to see. Because the deaths were spread across years, jurisdictions, and cause categories. You would only see the pattern if you had all 43 names in one place. 11 had their lives methodically dismantled. Careers ended by allegations that materialized from nowhere and dissolved just as quickly once the damage was done. Reputations destroyed by stories that ran hard and retracted softly. Sources that appeared credible and later couldn't be located. The architecture of public destruction, deployed with surgical precision. And near the bottom of that list, added 4 months before she walked out of her office and into 7 years of absence. Hart, active. Priority. She wasn't investigating them and stumbling toward danger. She was already in the system. Already designated. Already being processed by a machine that had done this 42 times before her. The briefcase didn't just contain evidence. It contained the complete operational history of the most dangerous thing these people built, and proof that they had been running it, in plain sight, for over a decade. Watch the clock from the moment that footage hit the internet. Because what happened in the hours and days after Amelia walked back into the world is not a series of coincidences. It is a response. Coordinated, layered, and executed with the kind of speed that only exists when someone had a contingency plan already drafted, which means someone, somewhere, always considered this a possibility they needed to be ready for. Hour 1 through 6, the footage spreads. Hour 6, the first deletion. 3 government database entries, independently documented by researchers who had been monitoring relevant public records, were removed within a 6-hour window following the footage going live. Not archived. Not reclassified. Deleted. The metadata confirming both the existence and the removal of those entries was captured and verified by cybersecurity analysts with no institutional affiliation to Amelia or her legal team. 2 additional deletions are suspected but not yet fully confirmed. The timestamps on what was captured placed the activity beginning less than 20 minutes after the first major platform began circulating the train station clip. Someone was watching for this. Someone had their hand on a switch. 48 hours after her reappearance, open any of 7 major media outlets and you would find coverage of Amelia Hart that used, across different articles, different authors, and different publications, language so consistent it defied independent coincidence. Mentally unstable. Radicalized. Making unverified claims. Not variations of those phrases, those phrases. Journalists who have since reviewed the coverage have noted that the framing, the word choices, and the sequence of characterizations follow a pattern consistent with coordinated narrative seeding rather than independent editorial judgment. 7 outlets. Same language. Different bylines. No shared sourcing disclosed. The 2 reporters who broke the story before the narrative management could contain it were dealt with separately. One was suspended within 36 hours pending what their outlet described as an ongoing editorial review, a process that has produced no public findings and no timeline for resolution. The other had their federal press credentials flagged through a process their attorney has described as procedurally irregular and without documented cause. Both of them are still fighting those actions. Neither has been charged with anything. Then there is the matter of the federal spokesperson. Within 48 hours of the footage surfacing, before any official body had completed, or in several cases even commenced, a formal review of the briefcase contents, a named government spokesperson issued a public statement describing the documents as fabricated. Not unverified. Not under review. Fabricated. Think about what that requires. To call specific evidence fabricated before examining it, someone had to already know what the evidence contained. Which means someone in that spokesperson's chain of command had been briefed on the contents of a briefcase that was, officially, not yet in government hands and not yet subject to any official process. They knew what was in it before they were supposed to know it existed. The retired schoolteacher who had exchanged words with Amelia on Platform 7. A 67-year-old former educator who had given a calm, brief, 3-minute statement to an independent reporter describing what she observed, stopped answering her phone 72 hours after that statement was published. Her family, reached for comment by 2 separate journalists, offered the same word. Traveling. No destination offered. No return date given. A 67-year-old woman who, by every available account, had no history of sudden unexplained absences, traveling somewhere unspecified at a moment of extraordinary convenience for people who needed her quiet. And 6 days after Amelia's reappearance, at 2 a.m., federal agents arrived at the home of Amelia's sister. No warrant was presented. No formal identification of the authorizing agency was provided. When a neighbor, awake by chance, alarmed by the vehicles, began filming on their phone and that footage became visible to the agents at the door, they left. Without entering. Without serving any document. Without explanation. They left because they were on camera. Remind you of anything? Here is what you need to understand about everything in this section. None of it disproves the briefcase. None of it addresses the list, the recordings, the financial records, or the 11 years of documented operational coordination. Every single move made in the aftermath of Amelia's return was aimed at her credibility, her family, her witnesses, her momentum. Not one move was made to transparently engage with the evidence itself. Because you don't attack the messenger this hard unless the message is real. The reaction is the confession. Read it accordingly. This is where I need you to zoom out. Because everything we've covered so far, Amelia's disappearance, the 7 years, the briefcase, the immediate counterattack, all of it can be processed as one extraordinary story about one extraordinary woman. And if that's how it gets filed in your mind, then the people who built Operation Lodestar have already won a partial victory. Because the entire point of how they operate is to make systemic crimes feel like isolated incidents. To make the architecture invisible by keeping your attention on the individual. So let's look at the architecture. Lodestar was not invented from nothing. It was not the fever dream of a single rogue contractor or one corrupt official who went too far. It was built, resourced, staffed, operationally refined over 11 years, to serve a very specific and very deliberate purpose, to protect a specific class of power from a specific kind of accountability. The accountability that comes from documented evidence. From sourced journalism. From lawyers who follow the money all the way to the end of the trail instead of stopping where they're paid to stop. It was built because that class of power had calculated, correctly, for a long time, that the system designed to check them could be made to serve them instead. Courts move slowly. Oversight committees are chaired by people with donors. Regulatory bodies are staffed by people who came from the industries they regulate and will return to them when their public service concludes. The gaps between those institutions are wide enough, if you have enough money and enough patience, to disappear almost anything. Including people. And here is what should remove any remaining comfort you might have about this being an American anomaly: it isn't. Partially declassified documentation from allied nations. The United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, reveals programs with different names and the same operational DNA. Monitor. Discredit. Neutralize. The language shifts. The targeting criteria shift. The fundamental logic doesn't. Journalists investigating defense procurement. Lawyers pursuing environmental liability against state-adjacent corporations. Whistleblowers inside intelligence-adjacent contractors who decided their conscience outweighed their non-disclosure agreement. This is not a template someone invented for Amelia Hart. Amelia Hart was run through a template that already existed, tested, refined, and shared among a community of interest that crosses national borders as easily as the money does. Now consider the revolving door at the center of this specific case. The private intelligence contractor whose communications fill the first layer of that briefcase has placed senior personnel into 3 consecutive administrations. Not one party. Both. The names rotate. The positions shift between oversight roles and advisory roles and appointed roles. But the contractor's presence in the rooms where decisions get made about contractors, including decisions about whether to investigate contractors, has been continuous, unbroken, and almost entirely unremarked upon by the institutions nominally responsible for flagging exactly this kind of conflict. This is not a conspiracy of villains in a room. This is a consensus. A quiet, durable, bipartisan consensus among people who have concluded, and who act on that conclusion every single day, that certain truths are simply too expensive to allow into the world. Too destabilizing to the arrangements that keep specific people powerful and specific systems funded and specific investigations never quite reaching the people at the top. Amelia was one of 43. 43 people formally entered into a targeting system by individuals who decided their existence as truth-tellers was an unacceptable operational risk. 9 of them are dead. 11 of them had their lives taken apart piece by piece until there was nothing left worth destroying. And the rest are still out there. Some of them still fighting. Some of them silent in ways that may or may not be voluntary. Some of them waiting, without knowing they're waiting, for the world to finally ask the right question about what happened to them. This story is about Amelia Hart. But the system that took her wasn't built for Amelia Hart. It was built for all of them. And the only reason you're hearing about any of it is because one woman on a list of 43 refused to stay buried. Here is where I have to be honest with you about something. This story doesn't end cleanly. It doesn't end with handcuffs on the right wrists, with a courtroom moment, with the kind of resolution that lets you close a tab and feel like justice is a functioning mechanism. It ends the way these stories usually end, partially, uncomfortably, and not yet. 3 law firms agreed to represent Amelia in the weeks following her return. 3 law firms subsequently withdrew, citing, in language that was careful and identical in its vagueness, conflicts they could not disclose. A 4th firm agreed to proceed. Their identity is sealed. The case is filed under a designation that shields it from the standard public docket. They are working, somewhere, on something, and that is the most that can be confirmed. 2 members of Congress, to their credit, formally requested a closed-door intelligence briefing on the contents of the briefcase and the history of Operation Lodestar. The request was denied at the committee chair level. Not delayed. Not redirected. Denied. The members who made the request have not commented publicly beyond confirming the denial occurred. The chair who denied it has not commented at all. Amelia's current location is undisclosed. She communicates through a single encrypted channel to a small number of verified contacts. She has given no interviews. She has made no public appearances since the train station. She is, by every available measure, deliberately and strategically invisible, having learned, at considerable personal cost, exactly what visibility costs when the wrong people know where you are. Her last verified message to a contact, shared with authorization, the briefcase was never the whole story. I kept the most dangerous part. Read that sentence as many times as you need to. One arrest has been made in connection with Lodestar. A low-level contractor, not a decision-maker, not an architect, not anyone whose name appears in the communications Amelia collected. He pled out quietly, through an agreement reached before any trial date was set. His sentencing is sealed. The plea agreement is sealed. The cooperation, if any, that he provided in exchange for whatever he received, sealed. The names above him in the operational chain, untouched. Still holding their positions. Still collecting their salaries. Still present in the rooms where decisions get made. Amelia's sister gave one statement to the press in the weeks following the return. She is not a public person. She did not seek the attention. But she stood in front of a single camera and said what needed to be said in 11 words. She came back to finish what they tried to stop. She's not done. Neither is the story. The briefcase is working through legal channels at a speed that institutions control when they want things to move slowly. The 43 names are in the possession of people trying to determine how to make them matter in a system that has, so far, proven remarkably resistant to matching. The recordings exist. The financial records exist. The 11 years of documented coordination between private money and public power exist. And somewhere. Location undisclosed, channel encrypted, most dangerous part still unreleased, Amelia Hart is not waiting. She's working. Let me ask you something. Not about Amelia. Not about Lodestar. Not about briefcases or train stations or lists of 43 names. About you. If a credentialed investigative journalist, published, sourced, legally trained, with documented evidence and an editor who knew her work, can be made to vanish for 7 years without a single person in an official institution being held responsible for it, what exactly are you trusting when you trust the system? Not a hypothetical journalist. Not a character in a film. A real woman with a real case number that was opened, stalled, and quietly closed while the men she was investigating sent flowers to her funeral. What are you trusting? Because here is the thing about the other 43 names on that list that I can't stop thinking about. Amelia had resources. She had discipline that most people, under those conditions, in that isolation, facing that offer, would not have been able to sustain. She had, by her own accounting, a measure of luck at a critical moment. A careless handler. A document left on a table. 4 minutes. Most of the 43 didn't have that moment. Most of them just disappeared quietly. Careers ended by stories that couldn't be traced to a source. Deaths ruled accidental by medical examiners who only ever saw one case and never saw the list. Silences that the people around them eventually stopped questioning because silence, sustained long enough, starts to look like it was always the natural state of things. How many briefcases exist right now, in legal holds, in encrypted drives, in the memories of people too afraid or too isolated or too thoroughly destroyed to carry them anywhere, that the world will never see because no one was watching the right camera at the right moment? How many Amelias never made it to the train station? The most dangerous thing Amelia Hart did was not return. Returning took courage of a kind most of us will never be tested for, but courage alone doesn't change systems. The most dangerous thing she did was simpler and more radical than that. She refused to be forgotten. In a machine specifically engineered to make people disappear without remainder, she held on to her name, her evidence, and her intention for 7 years in conditions designed to extinguish all three. And then she walked back into the world and made forgetting her impossible. That's not just a personal act. That's a statement about what any of us can do with the truth when we refuse to let it be taken from us. The question this story is really asking isn't what happened to Amelia Hart. It's what happens to all of us if we decide stories like hers aren't our problem to know. Go back to the train station. Cold October morning. Platform 7. 8:42 a.m. A woman in a dark coat walking into frame with a weathered briefcase and 7 years of evidence and the absolute composure of someone who has been preparing for this exact moment since the day they were taken. She stops. She finds the camera. She holds it for 4 seconds. I want you to understand something about those 4 seconds that I haven't said explicitly yet. That station had 41 security cameras across its platforms and concourse. 41 angles. 41 possible frames. She chose that one. She knew the sight lines. She knew the coverage pattern. She knew exactly which lens would capture her face with enough clarity to be undeniable and enough context to be unignorable. She had planned which camera to look into the way you plan the most important thing you will ever do. Because it was. That look wasn't relief. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't the expression of someone who had survived something. It was a message. Composed, deliberate, and aimed, not at the camera, not at the station's security desk, not even at the men whose names live in that briefcase. At us. I'm here. I have it. Watch what they do next. And we watched. And they did exactly what she knew they would do, deleted, suppressed, smeared, silenced, arrived at a sister's door at 2 a.m. without a warrant and left when a neighbor pointed a phone at them. The briefcase is still moving through legal channels at the speed institutions move when they are not in a hurry to arrive at accountability. The 43 names are still waiting for the weight of public attention that changes what courts and committees calculate is politically survivable. The most dangerous part, whatever Amelia kept back, whatever didn't go into that weathered brown leather, is still with her, location undisclosed, channel encrypted, timing entirely her own. And the people who built Operation Lodestar, who ran it for 11 years across 3 administrations, who put 43 names into a targeting system and processed them with the administrative calm of people who had never once considered consequences, they are still in their offices today. 7 years. 1 briefcase. 43 names. And the people who tried to bury all of it are still in their offices today. This story isn't finished. And if you want to know who's on that list, and what they're doing right now, at this moment, to make sure you never find out, subscribe. Because we're going to keep pulling on this thread until the whole thing unravels. And based on what's already come out of 1 briefcase, it's going to unravel.